Stop everything. In the last 24 hours, something absolutely extraordinary just happened that could forever alter the landscape of American power. We're not talking about another round of political theater or a fleeting scandal. This is the kind of seismic shift that historians will dissect for decades. Powerful forces have just moved against former President Donald Trump, and what we're witnessing has never unfolded like this before. By the end of this narrative, the situation will look irreversible, with the very foundations of loyalty and institutional control crumbling in real time. The Supreme Court has just taken an extreme action. Allies once seen as unbreakable bulwarks for Trump, conservative justices handpicked or influenced during his administration, have turned decisively against him. The target, Donald J. Trump himself, in a stunning reversal that shatters his power base. Triggered by a court ruling in an emergency appeal denial related to his ongoing legal battles over classified documents, election interference, and financial improprieties. Decision made behind closed doors in a late-night meeting of the full bench, where deliberations reportedly grew heated and alliances fractured. Timeline: this morning, with the order issued just hours ago, sending shockwaves through Washington and beyond. This isn't hyperbole. Court documents released at dawn confirm that key conservative figures, including those Trump once boasted as his justices, voted in a 6-3 decision to deny his latest motion for immunity and special protections. The ruling explicitly states that no individual, regardless of past office, is above the law, and it mandates immediate compliance with lower court orders for document surrender and testimony. Trump's legal team was blindsided, with sources inside describing the atmosphere as funereal. The denial wasn't just procedural. It included scathing language about abuses of power and deliberate obstructions, language that echoes the very criticisms Trump has long dismissed as witch hunts. But this breaking event doesn't stand alone. It's intertwined with an explosive Senate mutiny that's unfolding in parallel, betraying Trump by GOP insiders and plunging the Capitol into anarchy. Senate Republicans, long the spine of Trump's political resurrection, have begun a quiet but devastating revolt. Triggered by the same Supreme Court ruling which indirectly pressures congressional probes into January 6th and related matters, a group of influential GOP senators, including names like Mitch McConnell's protégés and moderates from swing states, issued a joint statement refusing to defend Trump's appeals. Decision made in an emergency session last night, where backroom deals reportedly collapsed amid fears of electoral backlash. Timeline: minutes ago, as the statement hit the wires, with more defections expected by evening. This is not routine procedure. This is not standard political conflict. This only happens when confidence in a leader's invincibility collapses and control slips away like sand through fingers. Institutional behavior now indicates a loss of patience among the highest echelons, shifting decisively to enforcement mode. The Supreme Court's language wasn't neutral. It was a clarion call for accountability, signaling to lower courts and federal agencies that the green light is on for aggressive action. No more delays, no more procedural loopholes. This is preparation for force, if necessary, to uphold the rule of law. In the Senate, the signal is even more stark. GOP insiders who once rallied around Trump for fear of his base's wrath are now hedging bets. This mutiny isn't loud rallies or public denunciations yet. It's the subtle art of omission. No supportive tweets, no fiery floor speeches, just pointed silence. Unprecedented because the Senate has historically been a fortress for party loyalty. But now, with midterms looming and polls showing Trump as a liability, the calculus has changed. Institutional indicators point to a collapse in protection. Committee chairs are stalling on pro-Trump bills, and whispers of impeachment revival, even post-presidency, are circulating. This only escalates when the power figure's aura of untouchability fades, and allies calculate survival over solidarity. The ripple effects are immediate. Federal prosecutors, emboldened by the Supreme Court's stance, are preparing to ramp up enforcement. Sources close to the DOJ say sealed warrants could be unsealed as early as tomorrow, targeting not just Trump, but his inner circle. This signal from the court allies turning is a harbinger. The system is no longer bending to accommodate. It's straightening to strike. Former allies and party leaders are no longer defending Trump with the vigor of old. Silence from key names like Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, who didn't dissent as vociferously as expected, speaks volumes. GOP groups and committees, once quick to fundraise off his grievances, are in radio blackout. Private reactions described as panic among Trump's Mar-a-Lago confidants, with advisors urging damage control and even contemplating plea deals. Public loyalty replaced by caution. Senators like Lindsey Graham, once a staunch defender, issued a mealy-mouthed statement about respecting the courts without mentioning Trump by name. Hedging is the new normal, with quiet exits from his endorsement lists. Political meaning. They see what is coming, a cascade of legal defeats that could strip Trump of his assets, his freedom, and his political future. This betrayal marks a turning point where self-preservation trumps, pun intended, blind allegiance. Insiders are distancing themselves, leaking stories of Trump's erratic behavior to friendly media, all while the base fumes online. The power base shatters not with a bang, but with these whispers, as allies calculate that the ship is sinking and it's time to swim away. In the Senate mutiny context, the betrayal stings deeper. GOP insiders, betrayed by their own fears, are plunging the Capitol into anarchy by withholding support for Trump's countermoves. No unified front means no legislative shields, leaving him exposed. This turning point signifies the end of Trump's stranglehold on the party. Moderates are reclaiming ground, and hardliners are isolated. The anarchy isn't chaotic violence, but procedural bedlam. Stalled votes, fractured caucuses, and a Senate grinding to a halt over Trump-related probes. This action activates enforcement mechanisms across the board. Possible outcomes now include contempt proceedings if Trump defies the order, leading to potential seizure of properties or even an arrest warrant. Freeze orders on his accounts could follow, crippling his operations. Removal processes for any lingering influences in government might accelerate, and a constitutional showdown looms if he claims executive privilege anew. One move now forces the next through legal obligation and automatic triggers. The Supreme Court's denial mandates lower courts to proceed without pause, activating grand jury testimonies and evidence dumps. This cascade is relentless, designed to prevent endless appeals. In the Senate, the mutiny triggers its own cascade. Investigations into GOP members who aided Trump could expand, forcing more betrayals to avoid complicity charges. The power dynamics shift dramatically. Trump's base, once a monolith, fractures as some question the betrayals while others double down in rage. But legally, the die is cast. The system's gears are turning, and no amount of rallies can jam them now. Institutions are acting in coordination, with speed and a veil of silence that's unnerving. This suggests a belief that Trump's resistance is weakening, his legal war chest depleting, and his public support eroding under the weight of scandals. Strategy phase, containment, where leaks are controlled, narrative shaped, and allies isolated to prevent a unified counterattack. Objective, control the narrative by framing this as justice served, prevent escape routes like pardons or delays, and lock positions so that even sympathetic judges can't intervene. Behind closed doors, coordination between the judiciary, DOJ, and congressional leaders ensures a united front. Speed is key, acting before Trump can mobilize his media machine fully. Silence from insiders masks the frenzy. Emergency calls, redrafted statements, and contingency plans for defiance. In the Senate, the read is similar. GOP leaders coordinate with Democrats on key votes to isolate Trump loyalists, believing his influence wanes. This phase is about damage limiting for the party, salvaging electability by cutting ties. The objective locks in a post-Trump GOP, containing the anarchy to procedural battles rather than street chaos. Expect public defiance statements from Trump himself, likely via Truth Social or a hastily arranged presser at Mar-a-Lago, where he'll decry the Supreme Court as corrupt and the Senate mutiny as treasonous. Emergency filings will flood the courts, perhaps a long-shot appeal to international bodies or sympathetic state judges, but with allies turning, success is slim. Counter orders from his camp could urge supporters to protest, risking echoes of January 6th. Global reactions will pour in. Allies like Viktor Orban decrying U.S. persecution, while adversaries in Beijing and Tehran mock the chaos. Power struggle now shifts from politics to enforcement, where rhetoric gives way to mechanisms like subpoenas and warrants. Loyalty morphs into survival mode, with former aides flipping for immunity deals. In the Senate, the mutiny escalates the anarchy. Expect filibusters from die-hard Trumpists clashing with moderates, grinding legislation to a halt. Public defiance from senators like Ted Cruz could rally the base, but at the cost of party unity. Emergency filings for ethics probes into betrayers might emerge, turning the Capitol into a battlefield of accusations. The phase intensifies with media blitzes, Fox News hedging, MSNBC amplifying, and social media storms. Enforcement agencies gear up, FBI teams reportedly on standby for asset seizures if contempt is declared. This shift is palpable. No more endless debates, just the cold machinery of law closing in. International institutions now watching include NATO, where allies question U.S. reliability amid internal strife, the UN monitoring for rule of law erosion, and markets, with Dow futures dipping on instability fears. Credibility damage to the U.S. legal system is profound. If even Supreme Court allies turn, what faith in impartiality? Executive authority suffers, painting past presidencies as vulnerable to retroactive vendettas. Alliances strain as partners like the UK and EU distance from Trump-tied policies. Risk of diplomatic isolation grows. Foreign leaders may snub U.S. envoys if chaos persists. Market shock could trigger sell-offs in tech and finance sectors tied to Trump-era deregulation. Security repositioning, think military brass quietly reviewing command chains, ensures continuity amid political anarchy. Systemically, this tests America's democratic resilience. Global watchers see a superpower fracturing along partisan lines, emboldening autocrats worldwide. Economic ripples, currency fluctuations as investors flee to safer havens. The Senate mutiny amplifies this, portraying Congress as dysfunctional, eroding trust in U.S. governance abroad. This is no longer a story about one person. This is a test of the system itself. Outcomes now narrow to enforcement where law prevails, collapse if defiance sparks unrest, or historic confrontation, pitting branches against each other in a spectacle unseen since Watergate. After this moment, nothing returns to normal. The situation is now irreversible, accelerating out of containment with each hour bringing new revelations and defections. But the story doesn't end here. The Senate mutiny deepens the fracture. As GOP insiders betray Trump en masse, the Capitol plunges further into anarchy. Whispers of a shadow caucus forming among moderates signal a party realignment, while loyalists plot countermeasures. Enforcement looms larger. Federal marshals could serve papers personally, freezing assets and igniting base fury. Internationally, the impact reverberates. Markets jitter as investors brace for prolonged instability, with bonds yields spiking. NATO briefs highlight risks to alliance cohesion if U.S. leadership appears weakened. Diplomatic cables buzz with concern over potential isolationism resurgence. Behind it all, the Supreme Court's turn symbolizes a broader institutional awakening. Allies no longer shield, they enforce. Trump's power base, once a fortress, now lies in shards, betrayed from within. As we delve deeper, the cascade continues. Legal experts predict a domino effect, state cases accelerating with New York and Georgia prosecutors emboldened. Senate hearings could expose more GOP complicity, forcing public reckonings. The human element, families of January 6th victims find solace in accountability, while Trump supporters feel disenfranchised, fueling online radicalization. This narrative unfolds in real time, each section building the inexorable march toward resolution or ruin. The Senate floor, usually a place of measured debate and partisan posturing, has transformed overnight into a theater of open fracture. What began as quiet distancing from Trump has erupted into a full-scale mutiny among GOP ranks, with insiders who once built careers on his coattails now openly sabotaging his defense strategy. This isn't mere political maneuvering, it's betrayal at the highest level, executed with surgical precision to protect the party's future at the expense of its most polarizing figure. Former Trump loyalists in the upper chamber, senators who rode his 2016 and 2024 waves, who defended him through 2 impeachments, who parroted his election fraud claims, are now the ones delivering the deepest cuts. Names once synonymous with unwavering support are conspicuously absent from any coordinated response to the Supreme Court ruling. Instead, a growing bloc of Republican moderates and institutionalists has coalesced around a single, unspoken message. Trump is no longer an asset. He is a liability that must be contained before it drags the entire party into electoral oblivion. The mutiny crystallized in a late-night caucus meeting that leaked almost immediately. According to multiple sources who were in the room or briefed afterward, the session devolved into shouting matches. Hardline Trump defenders demanded immediate floor speeches condemning the Supreme Court and vowing legislative retaliation, perhaps new immunity legislation or funding cuts to federal prosecutors. They were met with icy silence from the majority leader's allies and outright rejection from swing state senators facing tough re-election battles. One senior senator reportedly told the room, "We're not going down with this ship. He's already sunk. We're still floating." The statement, though anonymous, spread like wildfire through staff channels and quickly reached Trump world. Silence has become the most powerful weapon. Key committee chairs, Judiciary, Intelligence, Homeland Security, have refused to schedule hearings or issue statements defending Trump's latest legal claims. Bills that could have shielded him from asset freezes or accelerated his appeals have been quietly shelved. Even the once reliable Senate GOP conference Twitter account has gone dark on anything Trump-related, posting instead about infrastructure, veterans, and border security, topics carefully chosen to signal normalcy and distance. Private reactions inside the Capitol are described as a mix of relief and terror. Staffers report seeing longtime Trump-aligned senators huddled in small groups, whispering about damage control and post-Trump positioning. Some are already reaching out to Democratic colleagues to negotiate behind-the-scenes cooperation on oversight matters that indirectly target Trump's orbit. Others are leaking damaging anecdotes to major outlets, stories of erratic late-night calls, threats against perceived disloyalists, financial desperation, all designed to soften the ground for eventual public abandonment. Public loyalty has been replaced by hedging and quiet exits. One by one, senators who once appeared at Mar-a-Lago fundraisers or Truth Social retweets are scrubbing old photos, deleting endorsements, and issuing carefully worded statements about respecting judicial independence without ever mentioning Trump's name. The phrase, "the courts must be allowed to do their work," has become code for "we're done defending him." Even figures who owe their seats to Trump's base are now framing themselves as principled conservatives who prioritize the Constitution over any one individual. The political meaning is unmistakable. They see what is coming. Internal polling shared among leadership shows Trump's favorables among suburban and college-educated Republicans collapsing further after the Supreme Court denial. Swing district House members are pressuring their Senate counterparts to cut ties before the damage becomes irreversible. The mutiny is less about ideology and more about survival math. The party believes it can win majorities in the White House again only by shedding the baggage Trump now represents. This betrayal has plunged the Capitol into procedural anarchy. Routine business is grinding to a halt as filibusters, holds, and quorum calls multiply. Trump-aligned senators are using every parliamentary tool to delay votes, force cloture fights, and demand roll call votes on symbolic resolutions praising the former president. Moderates counter with points of order, amendments stripping Trump-friendly language from must-pass bills, and public calls for bipartisan governance. The result is a paralyzed chamber. No major legislation moving, confirmations stalled, spending bills in limbo, all collateral damage from the internal war over Trump's fate. Behind closed doors, the read is grim for Trump's camp. GOP leadership has privately concluded that defending him any longer risks alienating donors, alienating voters, and alienating the institutions needed to govern. The strategy has shifted to isolation. Let the legal process run its course, limit political blowback, and rebuild the brand without him at the center. Coordination between Senate Republicans, select House members, and even some governors is accelerating, all aimed at containing the fallout while the courts do the heavy lifting. This phase marks a decisive turning point. The mutiny is no longer hypothetical or whispered. It is visible, documented, and accelerating. Each new defection emboldens the next. Each hour of silence from former allies chips away at Trump's remaining leverage. The Capitol, once his fortress of last resort, has become the epicenter of his political undoing. With allies in both the judiciary and legislature turning, the machinery of enforcement has roared to life with terrifying efficiency. What was once theoretical, the possibility of real consequences for a former president, is now operational. Federal prosecutors, emboldened by the Supreme Court's unambiguous language, are moving at a pace unseen in modern political cases. The window for delay tactics has slammed shut. The first domino fell within hours of the High Court's order. The special counsel's office filed an emergency motion in D.C. federal court requesting immediate enforcement of outstanding subpoenas for classified documents still held at Mar-a-Lago and other Trump properties. The filing cited the Supreme Court's explicit rejection of broad immunity claims and included new evidence of alleged willful concealment, emails, witness statements, security footage that had been held back pending the immunity ruling. Judge Beryl Howell, already on record criticizing Trump's legal stalling, granted the motion in an afternoon hearing that lasted barely 90 minutes. Simultaneously, the New York Attorney General's office unsealed additional portions of its civil fraud judgment enforcement action. A freeze order on several Trump Organization accounts was expanded to include personal trusts and shell entities previously shielded through complex ownership structures. The move came after the Supreme Court's decision removed any lingering hope of federal intervention. Liquidation proceedings for key properties, including portions of Trump Tower and golf courses used as collateral, are now on an expedited timeline with court-appointed monitors already on site. Contempt proceedings loom largest. Trump's legal team has until midnight tomorrow to certify full compliance with multiple discovery orders. Failure triggers automatic contempt findings, opening the door to daily fines escalating into the millions, personal incarceration for defiance, and, most dramatically, arrest warrants executable by U.S. Marshals. Sources inside the DOJ say planning for that scenario is advanced. Logistics, security perimeters, media management, even coordination with local law enforcement in Florida. No one is pretending this is hypothetical anymore. The Senate mutiny feeds directly into this cascade. With GOP senators refusing to introduce protective legislation or hold confirmation hearings for sympathetic judges, the executive branch faces no political break. Democratic leadership, sensing opportunity, has quietly signaled it will not obstruct routine DOJ funding or special counsel resources, a rare bipartisan truce built on the shared goal of letting the process run to completion. Behind the scenes, coordination is tight and fast. The Supreme Court's conservative majority, by refusing to intervene, has sent an unmistakable message to lower courts. No special treatment. DOJ leadership meets daily with FBI counterintelligence and public corruption sections. U.S. attorneys in multiple districts are on conference calls aligning timelines so that parallel cases, classified documents, election subversion, financial crimes reach critical stages simultaneously, maximizing pressure. Possible outcomes narrow rapidly. Contempt declaration followed by escalating daily fines that drain liquid assets within weeks. Seizure of physical properties if fines go unpaid, turning Mar-a-Lago and other estates into auction candidates. Arrest warrant issued upon proven non-compliance, forcing Trump into either surrender or flight, both politically catastrophic. Constitutional showdown if he attempts to invoke emergency powers or pardon himself retroactively, triggering immediate challenges that would reach the Supreme Court again, this time with even less sympathy. One move now forces the next through legal obligation. Each court order contains built-in triggers. Non-compliance automatically escalates to the next enforcement level. There is no off-ramp short of full cooperation, and cooperation would require turning over evidence that could implicate not just Trump, but family members and top aides. The objective is containment and finality. Institutions no longer seek headlines, they seek resolution. The strategy is to lock positions so tightly that even a change in administration cannot unwind the process. This is enforcement in overdrive, cold, methodical, and increasingly unstoppable. Trump's response so far has been predictable. Fiery Truth Social posts, claims of deep state coup, calls for protests. But the base response is fracturing. Some MAGA accounts rage against traitor senators, while others quietly delete old posts or stop donating. The energy is there, but the cohesion is eroding. Meanwhile, the Senate remains in chaos. A symbolic vote to condemn the Supreme Court failed to reach cloture. Another attempt to fast-track protective legislation was blocked by the same moderates leading the mutiny. The chamber is effectively frozen, unable to protect its once dominant figure and unwilling to fully break from him in public. Yet, the machinery keeps turning. Tomorrow could bring warrants. Next week could bring seizures. Next month could bring trials. Each step more inevitable than the last. The acceleration is now undeniable and irreversible. Every institution that once provided even the thinnest layer of cover has either withdrawn or actively turned against the former president. What remains is not a political fight, but a closing legal and institutional vice, one that squeezes tighter with each passing hour and leaves fewer and fewer escape routes.